So, welcome back to the podcast, guys. This is a great episode on the Pretty Good House, and I'm really excited to have both Bob Swinburne and Dylan Kinsey on to talk about a pretty good house that they design built in Vermont. So, everybody wants to hear more about people who are actually building pretty good houses out there. So, Dylan, why don't you tell us who you are and how you got into this?
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Great to see you both. My name is Dylan Kinsey, and I'm with Kinsey Construction up here in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. And I've been a builder for many, many years, the son of a builder. And I got into building this type of building sort of started learning how to do it in 2015 was the first super insulated building that we did in Wolcott, Vermont, not far from where I live. And this was before I had any real formal training in any of the high performance arts. And so my house is sort of a culmination of 4 or 5 years of learning how to do this and starting to meet all the right people in the industry. And I didn't really know that I was building a pretty good house until about halfway through. And I thought, oh, I think this is actually one of those houses that I've been hearing about, you know. And so I got linked up with Bob Swinburne, who's going to introduce himself in a second, who helped us figure out a whole slew of things that we didn't have figured out about how to do this building. And here we are, 2.5 years having lived in this building and know what it's like to put it together and live in it. So that's me.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear about what it's been like to live in it, right? Because a lot of times we'll present a pretty good house right after it's been built. So it's really exciting that you've been living in it for the last couple of years.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Bob, you helped out on this project as sort of a design build relationship. So tell us again who you are. People have heard you on the podcast a bunch, but remind everybody who you are and how you got connected.
Sure. I'm Bob Swinburne, architect outside of Brattleboro, up in the hills outside of Brattleboro. So I'm in the kind of the other end of the state from Dylan. And I am at this point very much involved with the Pretty Good House movement and a whole bunch of other things. I don't remember how Dylan actually came to me, but this was a project where I consider myself more of a consultant on this project. I'm looking at the drawings. I only had 3 pages of drawings. So he certainly got the best bang for the buck out of what I can do.
For sure.
But that's part of the Pretty Good House too, though, right? Is that maybe it's not always that you've done a full design. Maybe it's that you have somebody like yourself, Bob, or an energy consultant, a HERS rater, a passive house consultant who helps you kind of take your ideas and get to this level, right? So Pretty Good House isn't meant to be a metrics that you have to hit certain targets. It's meant to be like, how do we build the best enclosure and house that we can, for the money that we have to spend. So for those of you listening on the podcast, I encourage you to hop over to the YouTube channel to see, we're going to share some pictures and visuals of this project as well. But since this is a podcast, we're going to talk through the ideas. So, if you want to see photos of the house that we're talking about today, pop on over to the YouTube channel. But so Dylan, when you got started, you and your family had an idea. So what was your goal or your concept here with your idea?
Yeah, well, so as I said at the intro, we had built a few super insulated buildings. And actually the first one that we built won an award in 2016 at Efficiency Vermont's Better Buildings by Design conference for Best of the Best, I was so excited because I think that's the furthest north. I could see at the right after the keynote presentation, there's a map of Vermont. There's this little red dot at the very tippy top of the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, and that was our project. It was one of the first, I think, certified high performance projects in that area, as to my knowledge. So we had a few of these behind us at that point, and knowing that we were going to build our own house and had been working on it, boy, am I glad I waited a few years, because I would have done so many things wrong, what I would call wrong now. And so the vision was like, well, we live in this neighborhood of old farmhouses, and a little red schoolhouse with a belfry. And I grew up in a Cape, farmhouse style house, and it was kind of my first love, and I just thought, well, can't we make this work? Can't we do a house that looks like it belongs here, that looks right in the landscape and fits in with its neighbors, because it's fairly visible. It's a little ostentatious where we decided to place it, and so it was kind of important to me that it didn't look really odd, compared to its neighbors. So through some mutual friends, I quickly realized that Bob was a great fit because he was doing buildings that looked like this, and we went to see one of them. And so I thought, oh, well, it's not like it hasn't been done. This is a really cool version of what I'm talking about. And it was actually, the building that we visited was so close to what we were trying to do that it was a natural fit for us to work with Bob.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the high performance home industry has gotten knocked on, is that there are a lot of boxes and there are a lot of super modern things in the realm of high performance, and there are a lot of people who are really interested in the details of the old houses and how they worked, and trying to figure out how to do both. And Bob does a great job of this with the Vermont Simple House and with his his custom design projects. And so when I saw this and I took a look at it, I said, oh, that looks like one of Bob's Vermont Simple houses. So
it does.
So let me just cover real quick for those who are watching this, and if you're listening to it instead, there are a few things I want to highlight. The house is 1750 square feet. It's 2 bedrooms with a full basement. Your foundation insulation was 5 inches of XPS R30 on the inside of the walls. We'll come back to that. And then 5 inches of EPS foam under the slab, double stud wall. That's 12 inches deep with approximately R42 of dense packed cellulose, vented unconditioned attic, and R85 cellulose on the attic floor. You have a blower door of 0.32 ACH, so you worked hard at that one. Clear wall, triple glazed windows. Your design temperature was -5 degrees in Vermont. Your heating load is 16,579 BTUs per hour. And your space heat is Mitsubishi single zone ductless mini split air source heat pump rated at 20,000 BTUs. You have a 40-gallon state brand heat pump hot water heater and a Broan ERV and a 6.7 kW PV array on the roof. So there's a whole bunch more information on here if you want to go to the slide and actually look at it. But those are some of the simple things that you tried to achieve here in this house, or not tried to achieve. Obviously, you did. This is what you built. So let's start at the size and the number of bedrooms. So the push for me in the real estate market is that everybody needs 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and 2,500 square feet. So how did you decide that that wasn't really what you wanted for your family?
Yeah, we tried to make this thing smaller than that, and the reason I'm calling it 1750 is that due to the knee walls upstairs on the east side, so you can see that you can't stand up full height for several feet toward the sides of the building, and so I sort of slice a piece of that off and figure that's not countable usable space. But if you want to multiply both floor decks, or the floor deck by 2, you'd get more like 2,000 square feet or just over. So we tinkered with, and maybe I don't remember if Bob was in on this, the 26 by 34 building. This is a 28 by 36 building. It was just a little tight. We probably could have pulled it off. We don't have kids and we don't have any dogs. We have 1 cat, and we were both trying to run businesses out of this house. My wife is a massage therapist, so we were trying to figure out, how do we move the massage office to the house? Can we do it? Can we do it all in one building? And this is what we came up with. We thought, we'll have the business office downstairs, which Bob helped us arrange, and I didn't have that figured out well at all. That was kind of what our goal was. Can we run both businesses out of this house and live in it and get as many things right as possible without obsessing too much, because you can't get it all in one building? And can we retire in this building? will we have to put an addition on it with a, to put a bedroom downstairs if we get too old to go upstairs? Maybe, but probably not. There's probably a way to remodel it. So that's kind of how we got to the size.
Yeah. And so makes total sense how you got to the 1750 with the knee walls on the upper floor. And I want to ask about how you insulated that, and if you insulated along the rafter slopes and have conditioned storage space, or whether you did sort of across the ceiling and up the knee wall walls. But before we get to that, when you say 1750 and that it's a 28 by 36, you're actually talking exterior, right? So I get this question a lot. The
Okay.
exterior footprint of this house is 28 by 36.
Correct.
Um,
Yes.
which means that when you take your 12-inch walls out of that, because this is a double stud wall construction, you actually
Right.
have even less square footage than than what you sort of supplied here with the 1750.
That's true.
So you're moving towards even smaller, and we have to get creative a lot of times with the double stud walls because they take up a lot of space.
Couple things in terms of size. Yeah, we have 12-inch thick walls, so whether you measure from the inside or the outside, you get a pretty different number. I like to measure from in between. So for instance, this is what, 28 by 36, which is the equivalent of a 27 by 35 code minimum house. So for comparing, that's probably a more useful number. Also, in terms of floor plan, this is what we ended up for this project. Within this same shell, I probably could have fit 4 bedrooms. So this was the fit for their family, and we worked through that quite a bit, really. But I can take, any good designer can take this floor plan and turn it into any number of different things. And it was really a process of, yeah, we were a little bit smaller before, and there were some slightly tight spots, but you can, and this is part of the Pretty Good House philosophy, you can expand it a little bit. We always talk about shrinking, but you can actually expand it. You end up with the same number of windows, mostly all the same pieces and parts, so it's not necessarily costing more, but it makes it just that much more livable, and so people would be less likely to need to add on in the future. It becomes a little more flexible for other occupants down, over the next several hundred years. So, the looseness of that Pretty Good House philosophy comes into play here.
Yeah, that's a great point, too, is that once you've kind of created a simple shape, adding another foot to it so that the spaces actually work generally doesn't add a considerable amount of money. So, one of the things that I hate to talk about is, cost per square foot, because it's not really relative. Once you have a kitchen, once you have a bathroom, if your bedroom gets a foot larger, it's not another $350 a square foot for the bedroom, right? There are scales. Obviously, if you go from 1,700 square feet to 2,500 square feet, you're going to pay a lot more. You just have a lot more materials. But generally, to add a little bit of space like that to make the rooms work better, like you said, it was a little too tight. I can't imagine that if you had tried to do 26 feet, you just wouldn't have an office, or your living room would be so small that you know, we all have this idea that we can live with less space, and we certainly can, but there's less space and then there's completely unusable space. So
Yeah. Right.
as we're trying to do that, so we have to be cognizant of creating space that just doesn't work at all. So were there other challenges to the cape design that you found were difficult to work with when you were building this? Um, it's a beautiful traditional cape looking house, and capes are an older style with the challenges like we talked about with the knee wall spaces. But from your perspective as a builder, were there places here when you were trying to hit these energy targets like the 0.32 ACH 50? Were there areas that you said, well, this is what we did on this house and it worked and I learned, but I wouldn't do that again?
Let's see. This one was pretty easy to do. I'm trying to think if there was anything that really stood out as far as air leakage targets that was really difficult. Not so much. I mean, one thing that really saved it was Bob talking us out of having a dormer, and I knew better, but having a dormer to facilitate the bathroom upstairs. We had a shed dormer kind of in the middle of the back of the roof on the other side from what we're looking at now, and Bob cleverly, with our blessing, engineered that out. And I knew that was a better idea not to have it. That would have made things so much more complicated.
Yeah, you can see in the plan where he pushed the bathroom in far enough that you can, you can get the space that you needed in the bathroom without having a head height issue, which does
Right.
make some of your other rooms a little bit smaller. But as you mentioned, this is an office for your family, so that works. But it's also not so small that that you couldn't have room for a bed or something in the future if you create these different closet spaces and areas that you need to address that. Now, you have a full basement here, and you have what I saw, it looks like a bulkhead entry
Mm-hmm.
into your basement. Did you put a door at the bottom of your bulkhead?
Yeah, yeah, I did. That might be something I would avoid in the future. I think once the house is built, I'm realizing I don't really go through that door for any reason. It was really handy while we were building. We stored the whole siding package and trim package down there after I pre-stained some, the trim. Um, I built a really wacky super insulated door that's held on with clamps, and it's really cool, but it was fussy and it took me a while. So I have a swinging door, a fiberglass door with no glass, and then this super insulated panel that I outfitted to sort of make it go away. And really, I have not been through that more than 3 or 4 times in a couple of years. So I would have just gotten rid of that, I think, if I'd done this over.
Yeah. I mean, now that I hear you say that you have a door at the bottom of the stairs and you have an insulated cover that goes over it, it makes it clear how you could get to 0.32. Because I'm looking at the photo going, there's a bulkhead door? How'd they get that sealed tight enough, right? Because those
Uh-huh.
are always one of those crazy leaky spots that you just.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um,
I'm also looking at the front of your house now, kind of in this picture, and it has your PV array, which is great. And so I'm assuming that the 6.7 kW PV array does most, if not all, of your needs for this house.
yeah, we overused by about 52 kilowatt hours in the year, measuring from like I know, from like a
So
week.
excessive.
Yeah, I know. These two are like, we're hollering at each other. All right, that's one less shower. I mean, come on. So
No more afternoon coffee. You use too much
right,
electric.
that's right. We're going to bed early for a month. Whatever it takes. So, I found with all of our neat little apps and the Enphase box and interface and the what's the app I have on my phone for energy use? It was easier just to call my electric utility and say, could you just spit out my usage data and solar production? And it took about 5 seconds, and I had an entire year from the moment I was talking to her on the phone. And I thought, oh, great, good. We're living pretty much within our estimates. We're less than we thought we were going to use overall, and we're well within what the array was able to generate. So that's great. That's what we're looking for. Um,
Yeah, so you've lived in this house now for sounds like 2 years.
yeah.
And you've basically proven that you're meeting the targets that you planned for the array. Did you do an energy model on this beforehand so you had kind of an idea of what to expect?
Absolutely, I did. Yeah, and so I'm glad you got to this because I've been dying to talk about how I went through the Passive House Builders Certification course was really super fun, and I learned a ton of much needed building science that rounded out my education that I had begun a bunch of years before on Green Building Advisor and going to the conference and whatnot. But the thing that I got the most out of was Mark Rosenbaum's Zero Net Energy Homes course. That was crucial to me pulling together all of the pieces into one building. And this was my capstone energy project for that course. I had a lot of fun in that course and I learned a ton. And it not just, like I said, it just brought everything together. And this building is a culmination of all of that, all of my experience as a builder from the previous projects, and then all of that information. And so the energy model that I learned how to do modeling, which I don't sell because I don't think I'm good enough at it. But And so that's where those are where those numbers came from. And this sheet that I sent that you had up on that slide, the first slide, is a collection of numbers that came from that energy model. I just kind of scraped off the important ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you use for software for the energy model?
It was an in-house spreadsheet that the instructor had developed. So we didn't use something off the shelf. It was something that Mark has used on his
Okay.
shares with the course. Yeah.
Great. So it's some kind of, Excel spreadsheet or something that he put together that helped you to figure out. So very similar to PHPP is a complicated Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
And I think that Wolfie and Ecotrope and REM Design and Beopt and everything probably just have a fancy Excel spreadsheet in the background with a slightly more user-friendly interface for
Right.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I think you're right.
Yeah. And so on the house, you have the PV installed so that you could add another row on here. Do you have the intention of, building a garage and putting an electric car in, or were you simply thinking that, well, if we didn't get this quite right, we're going to install the PV so that we have room to install another row in the future if we need it?
Yeah, well, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, I was hoping, maybe I'm just lying to myself, that I wasn't concerned that we were actually gonna end up just using a lot more energy than we thought, you know. But Mark's good. His spreadsheet was pretty good. I mean, we really played around with, not, as he says, the garbage in, garbage out, which is like, if you're not really being honest about what you think you're going to be doing, for one, and actually do it for two, then none of this is going to work. So we did have a garage planned. It's really, really not very high on our list of priorities right now. And an electric car certainly someday, which would warrant that bottom row. Right now, we don't really need it. So
Yeah.
get caught up financially after the build, and then we'll talk about those as next steps. Yeah.
Sure. I just liked how you had your PV installed, and I thought, well, that's really a clever way of leaving enough room for future expansion, whether it's, a first floor bedroom, right? So you decide to live here for the rest of your life, and 20 years from now you need a first floor bedroom, you have room to, add a little bit more to it. Your mechanical system you talked about was a 20,000 kBTU mini split. Do you have just one or do you have multiple heads?
Just one head, actually, much to the disappointment and annoyance of our HVAC guy, who insisted we probably ought to put two heads. And, they always do that, right? And they're getting a little funny about us builders sort of like pushing back a little bit, like, I don't think we really need to do that. And I'm going to check your homework. And they're like, oh, they get a little freaked out. So, it's it's a small footprint. It is plenty cozy just the way it is. It's really cozy in this house. And in fact, to get the kind of bedroom temperature we prefer, we close the bedroom door upstairs just so it's a little cooler. So yep, that's it. It's a 1-to-1 single zone. There is actually a unit when we bought this heat pump. There was one that was a little bit smaller. I think it was an 18,000, and I think it was the same price. I don't remember what the deal was, but we were, maybe I kind of compromised with our HVAC guy a little. Oh, okay, well, we can make it a little bit bigger, but really, you know.
Yeah, certainly that's a big pushback that we get here in these low load homes is, right, I have a 11,000 kBTU load, and I only need one heat pump head. And then they say, well, distribution, we can't guarantee that there'll be even heat everywhere.
Yeah.
But correct me, Bob, because I can never remember the correct term. But people don't like it to be the same temperature in every room, right? So there's this whole design idea that, like you just mentioned, I like it cooler in my bedroom. I don't want it to be quite as hot there. But then in these low load homes, I mean, you have what did you say, 85 in your ceiling?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you're not losing a lot of heat. So you don't need the excess heat. And then once you start setting it up so there's distribution for every room, then you've already oversized your mechanical systems, which is one of the core things about Pretty Good House, is to try to spend more on the building enclosure so you can spend less on the mechanical system.
Totally. And Bob had a really handy piece of equipment that he was using for little satellite rooms on some projects for auxiliary heat. And it's this NV wall heater that we installed. We have a few of them throughout the house. It turned out that it was handy to have one in the massage room because with the door closed and people disrobing and getting onto a table, 72 degrees is still not quite right. And then you've had the door closed. So that's starting to sort of drift down to like maybe 70 or something. It needs to be good and warm in that room. So the NV does that room. It's perfect for that. We put one in the bathroom also thinking, oh, I'll have it on a cheap little programmable timer. Maybe we'll need to juice up the bathroom or something. And I don't know what I was thinking, but there's no need for that at all because it's a doors open kind of house unless, well, the bathroom's in use or there's a massage in progress or I don't know why it's really noisy and I close the office door, but mainly the doors are open, bedroom door closed during the day. So those are great little auxiliary heaters and they don't use much energy to take that little edge off. So you get a little warmer here and a little cooler over here. It's just turning the dials a little bit and it's not hard.
Yeah. And so as you live in your house and you get comfortable with that and how everybody uses their space differently, right? You have a massage room, so you need to turn that up a little bit. But, the next owner could have a small infant and want to turn it up there, right? Because, they like to keep it warmer. But then the next person could have a teenage kid and they want it to be 60 degrees and they leave the window open, right? So there's so many different ways, like you don't need it to stay warm in your house, but sometimes you might want it to be comfortable in a space. And so it's good to hear that the MVs don't use a lot because we get that pushback a lot, like, under tile electric floor mats and, electric baseboards. And depending on how people are financing their project, sometimes the lending institution will give us pushback and say, like, you have to have heat in every bedroom. And you kind of try to explain to them that that's not exactly how it works, but we're pretty set in our ways of how we do things. So maybe you had a little bit more leeway as the builder where you could really give it some pushback, but
A little. I do. It's good to check with your insurance company and lender on some of these little issues about like what they consider a heating system. There's been a little bit of pushback about, right? Is it considered a whole house heating system or something like that? And what I was told by several insurance carriers is that if you have some electric baseboard kicking around, which we generally do as auxiliary for sub-zero events, you're covered anyway. It's fine. We have a couple of strips downstairs on the first floor as our auxiliary heat. And I have a 6-foot strip in the basement as auxiliary heat. I have sort of a little workshop down there. I have never used them, not once. And that's because it hardly ever gets that cold anymore. And so the heat pump has chugged through, for the last couple of years and not needed any of that, any help in that area.
Yeah. So I've stayed on this slide because I wanted you to talk about the cat door. So how does the cat door work with the 0.32 ACH?
Well, this is a great story. Where did I find that cat door? And what is the name of it? Oh, gee,
Of course I had to ask that.
It's amazing. It is a blower door tested cat door. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's dang, I'll come up with it after this call. But anyway, there was a video that I found on some website where they are doing a blower door test with this cat door in it. And it's a company that makes a super airtight. It's got all the numbers that you would have on a high performance door or window. And I thought, oh, this is great because this is how this cat was raised. And he's, he was 10, he was 12 when we moved into this house. He wasn't going to change his routine. And I thought, well, this is really cool, not only because this is how we want to live. We want the cat to be able to do whatever he wants, but it's also, this is like normal house stuff. And you can make this work in a building like this, but you can't do one of these off-the-shelf hardware store pet doors. They don't work. You'd never get this. So the blower door cranked up to, I don't remember what, would not open this door in the video that I saw. And I thought, well, that's really great. It works. And he can
And the cat uses it?
And he uses it. He complained a little bit when at first. He was like, well, this is kind of hard to open.
He's like, what's this thing?
I know.
It's so difficult.
I missed the other one. It was so easy to push through, So No, it works great.
Yeah, that's awesome. The blower door, cat door. That's classic. That someone tested that.
Yeah.
And so a couple more things. With some interior pictures is, the clear wall windows. If people aren't familiar with clear wall windows, they're triple pane tilt and turns. At least I assume they tilt as well as turn. It looks like they
Oh yeah.
turn.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Um, so how has it been living with the triple pane tilt and turn windows?
It's amazing. It's funny, there's only a few of them that we really open in the summertime and for venting. And the first year of all seasons, we overheated several times, usually in the spring or in the fall, and we're trying to figure out how to mitigate that a little bit. And having a window that opens like that in the summer is really nice. We prefer that over running air conditioning, which we have on the first floor only. I think we've only ever run that unit on AC once. Um, it's amazing. The big thing is most of the year in Vermont, these are, a big hole in your wall is losing heat, right? So a really good plug for that hole in your wall is worth the effort. We have furniture and a dining room table set up next to a pretty good sized bank of those windows. And you could, with the wind howling outside, you can stand near it. Imagine this, folks. You can stand near a window inside your house and not have any idea what the weather is doing outside, unless the sun came out, and you certainly would feel that. But whether it's blowing, snowing, it doesn't really matter what temperature it is. You can't really tell, and I think that's kind of the part of the point.
So if you had it to do again, would you make less of them operable?
I might have just not had any at the kitchen operable. It turns out we don't really want those to open much anyway. One bummer about tilt turns, of course, is that they clear off whatever you have in the window well in the sill area. So you have to kind of plan that out a little bit. If there are a bunch that are going to be full of plants, maybe you just have them fixed units and don't worry about it. But I think it's really key to keep people thinking about which ones are going to be really good cross ventilation specific to their site. And there are two or three that we open, and the back door or the screen door, that are just wonderful in the summertime. And then there are a bunch on the south side we would never open because the way the wind travels through this valley, it would just knock everything off the table. And so something to think about. But
Yeah, that's definitely. And so you don't have to ask or answer any of the financial questions, but as far as triple pane windows, did you, so in 2018, I don't know what the cost of the clear walls were. I think I did a project with clear wall in 2018 as well in Rochester, New York, and they were really trying to get cost competitive coming into it. And so they, for our project, they weren't astronomical add to the cost, but and we're starting to find there are some great triple pane manufacturers now that are getting to be available if you have the time to wait for them.
yeah.
Because the lead time is longer, although the lead time in 2020 and 2021 has just been long for everything. So,
For everything, yeah. I'm
but
happy to share that information because we did price several types, and I would say that so we did the whole building with the two doors that you see, which are, 7.5 or 8 feet tall, not quite 8. The only door we didn't do was the back door on the north side. And I think we were pretty close to 30 grand, and we could have done, so some of the other budgets we played with were Marvin Integrity's triple glazed, casement awning type, which is sort of, I kind of start out with those just to see what a building's going to turn into and then kind of work out from there. And then I think we looked at, let's see, Pinnacle, it was Logic. We looked at Logic, which were UPVC. I think all those were great options. I think probably the Integrities were the worst buy for the performance. I think and I think that's probably still the case. We just put Schuco in the project that we're working on now in Greensboro, and they're definitely a step up from these LUPs that you see that are at my house, just in terms of their function. I think the performance is slightly better, probably not better enough to warrant how much they spent because they're spendier. A little nicer in the operation. These are fantastic. and it was, probably 6,000 more. But, you know, yeah, well, I can go on and on about windows and doors. I'm sure we all can, but
Yeah.
it
I'm
kind
sure
of,
we can all talk about windows and doors for
yeah, maybe I should just stop there. What really sold us was not just the performance, and yes, it was a little more money. It's kind of that last thing where like, yeah, this is one thing that we really want to be really well done. And so that's that decision that people have to make with their building. How much better than just baseline good triple glaze can I go, I guess.
Well, and I think you have a really traditional shape to your house, which warranted a certain number of windows, which maybe would have been more window to wall ratio than you would have done previously. And so being able to sit in your kitchen dining room area, which has a lot of beautiful windows, and be really comfortable in that space can't be undervalued. Whether the performance was significant enough to save you the $6,000, probably not. But the comfort of sitting in that space every day is worth so much money, and not something that we can kind of realize. But while we're talking windows, I'm actually going to go back to the section.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course on the section, I didn't put the other section that you had in here, but from the photos that we're looking at, it looks like you set your windows to the exterior. Is that where you installed the windows in the wall system in your double stud wall?
Yeah, we've pretty much always done that. I'm a little stuck in my ways when it comes to that one. I think the wall system and having the windows out pretty much flush with the sheathing or flush to the strapping seems like just a really straightforward way to do things. And I know that the performance is known to be slightly better if they're moved in a little bit. I think Bob pushed to have my doors, the two clear wall doors, pushed in, and I didn't. And I yeah, we typically push them all the way out.
That's pretty traditional in double stud construction, is to set it sort of in the exterior and have those deep window sills in the interior, which is another one of those things that it's a personal decision people really like.
Mm-hmm.
Over time with these new high performance windows, and I don't know if you had it with the Schuco's, we've installed Schuco's on the exterior and we've installed Schuco's in the middle of the wall system. And when you
Mm-hmm.
put them in the middle of the wall system, it feels like a slightly safer installation method. So
Uh-huh.
when you installed these on the exterior, do the clear walls come with a flange, and were you able to tape them like a traditional flange window, or did you have to tape over the flangeless window? And then what did you use for your window installation?
Yeah, so we'd never installed Windows like this before, and it was a little bit of a challenge getting some decent instruction out of the company. But they've got a strap that rotates 90 degrees onto a channel on the side, right? And so you tape directly to the aluminum on the outside to your air barrier. So I needed to go around with, I made a little scribe tool to make a little pencil line where to tape to on the outside, tape the outside of the air barrier. Um, and then the same on the inside, you tape over all of the little straps, metal straps, and then you tape to a line on the inboard side also after putting something in the cavity, the insulation cavity. Um, yeah, it's in some ways it was a lot easier. They're so heavy that we took the sashes out of the operables and put the frames in solo, and then pop the sashes back in. And then there are two triple gangs in the building. The center sashes are fixed. We couldn't remove those, but still it was much more manageable. We set those without the side sashes and then put the sashes back in.
And
So
the
I
sashes were relatively easy to get in and out to do that for
No,
install.
no, they weren't. The first is a real bummer, and you need some help because they're really heavy. But once you get that down, you realize that yeah, it's manageable. You learn an awful lot about the hardware after playing with it for a while. Unfortunately, it was January when we were doing this because I ordered mine too late because I was busy building other houses, and so it was not the most fun type time of year to have a building wide open with your gloves off, fiddling around with hardware and Allen keys and things. But so I recommend that you order your windows earlier.
I think that's a traditional issue with all builders and architects, whether you live in an existing house or whether you build your house, right? Your house is always like the last thing that you get to. I know Bob
Oh,
and I both live in older houses that we're slowly working our way to, and people are like, "Oh, I want to come to the architect's house," and we're like, "No,
no,
no, you want to go see something we built."
right, yeah, right.
We got to test everything in our own house. So I know some of this stuff was a learning experience for you. As you said, it was your
Yeah,
capstone project for Mark's class, and so
yeah,
you knew that there could be some things that you were not going to know how to do when you got to this.
right, right. Um, and this is our showroom too. You know, people come to this building to sit at our dining room table and talk to us about their building projects. And so, I mean, there was definitely an element of, maybe we turn the dial up on this thing and show people some tilt turn windows as an option. We'll live with them and we'll be able to report on all the things that we did and how that all worked out every time we meet with someone. And it's it's true. People are always just amazed by the windows. They're also amazed by the net area of glazing in this building. Which is something Bob really helped with in sizing these, stretching them, making them a bit taller. Um, you know, um, Getting all of that together was something I wouldn't have dared make them quite so tall, I guess. And they're not really that tall, but still, people walk in and they're like, "Wow!" Window envy is what is often, like, "Wow, I wish I had a window like that over my kitchen sink." Um, um,
Yes.
yeah,
So Bob, weigh in a little bit on that one. This is one of the things I love doing with you and working with you on is proportion. Is you know it's so critical to get the proportions right. And so a lot of times people will argue with you and you'll be like, no, no.
Yeah, I'm looking at a drawing here of Dylan's house, and there's a whole bunch of window dimensions. So head height for those big front windows, you can see in the left-hand picture there, living room windows, dining room windows, 7 foot 8 3/4 head height. So it was like a 8 foot 6 uh, ceiling height on the first floor, which feels, you typically a house would have 7 6 or 8 feet, but eight, just adding that extra 6 inches is huge.
huge.
But you do have to bring the windows up. That, and you don't want the window sill to be so high that when you're sitting down, you can't see the ground, you can't feel connected to the land. Um, so yeah, you end up with a 6.5 foot tall window in that wall, and then you balance the exterior proportions because we were going for very traditional proportions here, traditional trim, the whole works. We busted it a little bit with putting that center window in the dining room. All this, so you have this very regular New England Cape spacing, but with one extra window in there, which sort of tells the person looking at this that this is maybe not an old house. Something's going on here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Trim
You-
proportions. I'll just jump in real quick and mention. I remember on the facade, there was some discussion about the 8 foot 6 ceiling height, and then stretching the windows, making them actually longer, taller, because there is no standard size in Europe. You can get whatever you want. And then I was concerned because we had raised the knee wall height. I was concerned about the south facade, which is sort of the one that faces the roadside, being a little kind of high eyebrowed, sort of Tom Selleck. And so we had to kind of make sure we didn't get out of hand with this big chunk of wall above the windows. And Bob really nailed it. I think that's like the first version. Ellie and I were like, yeah, like that, right? Yeah, like, so it's not too tall. It just feels right. It looks like the neighbor's house.
You ended up with a really tall front door.
I did end up with a very tall. I have a pair of those. They're very tall. Yeah, they're heavy. But
yeah. How often do you use this door?
that one a lot in the summer. Actually, we step out, and the stoops really are still not finished. I have not really finished that work yet. But of course, the builder's house. But we step out. We step out and walk out on the lawn in the evening. And sit on the step at the end of the day. And the side door, the door on the east facade, and one of the other slides, it heads out to. Did I give you that slide? Yeah, it may have been the first
I
one.
was just say, I might only have this one.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
Side
right.
door.
Okay. So now there's a lot more going on this side now. There's a vegetable garden and picnic table, and we grill, and there's our intention is to have a deck out here. So this one gets used a lot. We ended up with a roll-away screen door, which is a good fit for this kind of a house, but for that kind of a door. But it's a little bit of a clunky mechanism. I think I'd look elsewhere next time I bought one of those. But
Yeah. So, what's your favorite part about this house and why you think it's a pretty good house?
um, well, it's just sort of encompasses everything that I think the pretty good house is. I did a bunch of freshening up on PGH blogs on Green Building Advisor and started listening to some back shows of BS and beer, and I kind of refamiliarize myself with all the key points. I think it's all of these things. It's a simple building. It's a simple shape. It's really easy to air seal. It's a quick construct. You're in and out pretty fast. If we had actually built this house start to finish uninterrupted and not gone off and been building other people's houses as general contractors do, well, I'm meaning I had to do that so that I could afford to build my own house. But it's really straightforward. It's just sort of it's got everything that it needs. It's got it where it counts, but it's not. It's uncomplicated, and it's not over. I don't think it's overdoing it in any way that I can see, and it's not really underdoing it either. It's just sort of a good middle ground.
Yeah, which is a great part of pretty good house, right? Sure, you can build a super complicated, really expensive, living building challenge house.
Yeah.
Or you can still legally build code houses. But there are so many reasons to kind of get, I mean, really, you're almost at net zero, or you were 50, would you say 52 kilowatts off of net zero on this simple build. It
Right.
has more than enough space for the two of you and what you're doing, and two businesses that both work from home, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Um, the space layout works great. That you came to Bob and said, hey, this is what we have, what we need. He helped you finesse it a little bit, and it works great for your family, and how you want to use it and feel. It looks to me like you have a wood stove in this house.
We don't actually, and so that's a little bit of a trick. We could, and I think we had Bob help us figure out where one would go, and hence the chimney that's sticking out of the roof that's not connected to anything. So my thought was, if we ever decided we wanted to do that for backup or auxiliary heat, we still could, but let's get that work done before it becomes really difficult and impossible to do later. So we had the chimney fitted through the steel roofing, through the attic, and then detailed through the flat ceiling upstairs. And so I can get to it with a ladder in the second floor ceiling and finish that work. It would be a long weekend to get the stovepipe connected down and a hole drilled through the floor to get a stove brought in here, but it wouldn't be calling 4 different subtrades back to get the job done.
Right. But after hearing that you've lived in this house for 2 years and that it's more than comfortable with what you have you ever felt the need to put one in? And do you really think that at this point you would be overheating your entire space by
Oh,
using a wood stove?
it would be absurdly it would be such a bad fit for this building. There's really nowhere to put it where you wouldn't like burst into flames. There's nowhere to go where you can get far enough away from a wood stove. They don't make one small enough for buildings like this, for one. I think it was part of the reason we went for this is that it was a little bit of like local pressure, sort of like peer pressure, really, like, boy, you really ought to just at least put something in. Or what if, I think maybe there was this like, well, what if the grid becomes really unreliable in the future and we want to have a wood stove to heat through, bizarre weather events if they become more regular, ice storms that knock lines down for weeks and that sort of thing. I don't know. It was an extra couple of $1,000s to goof around with the stovepipe, the metal, the double wall chimney, for kind of peace of mind. I don't think either of us ever intend to use it, to be honest with you. I mean, it's not on our radar, and we certainly don't need it. The one thing I would say about comfort and heat in this building is that, my father, who's like an old firewood guy and wood stove guy, just said, no, that's not going to work. Your house isn't going to work. Where are you going to come in from a cold day of working outside as a builder and warm up? And I'm like, oh no, he's right. You know, you need to go stand next to a wood stove to get warm. Well, actually, you don't. It turns out you can come into a building that's really comfortably warm everywhere you go and dry with nice air quality. And turns out that's comfortable. It doesn't take extremes, the ones that we grew up with, you know, where you it's like a bazillion degrees over here, and then it's 40 in the side bedroom with like icicles hanging on the inside of the set. Turns out that that's uncomfortable. So Dad was wrong. It's really comfortable because it's even temperature throughout, and not just the air. It's the materials. It's the thermal mass, the walls, the flooring. You know, everything is roughly the same temperature everywhere you go. Um, that's what makes a building comfortable.
So
Yeah.
the wood stove is so much more about kids and their snowsuits and all their stuff that needs to dry and their
Yes.
ski boots.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I find. That and the power outages. You know, in a house, yes, it's my entire heat source.
Right.
I need to keep it blasting all along.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
how often have you lost power at the house since you built it? And do you have a battery backup, or do you just sort of lose power and it doesn't lose enough heat to be uncomfortable?
So that's a great. I'm glad you got to this. I have a generator, but it's a gasoline generator, and it's a large enough one to run the whole house on. That I bought to back up new building sites, to start up new building sites, and so it would power this house, and I have the pedestal set up so I could plug that in and run this house that way if I wanted to. That has never happened. So we have not needed to use our auxiliary heat for sub-zero events to insulate us, you know, to help out the heat pumps when they are not functioning. And we have not had outages that lasted long enough to warrant that whole system when we don't have any battery backup.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So
It's
it's
such a great house. So
uh,
I really appreciate you sharing it with us. You know, I think it really epitomizes the pretty good house in Vermont, right? So this is a New England style house. It's a cape in its style. It's a high performance house where you just said, well, we lost power, but it never really got cold enough for it to be an issue that I needed to plug in my generator that I have, you know, and that, you know, the wood stove that you plan for isn't necessary, and that the single source mini split more than covers all of the different spaces with some auxiliary heat for very specific uses in spaces. And I think the one thing mechanically that we didn't talk about was you have either an HRV or an ERV in here that's doing your fresh air exchange, because at 0.32 ACH, it's tight.
it's tight. It is. Um, yeah, and that's you know, it's about the most bare bones setup you can get, I think, for whole house ventilation. It's a Baron 160 TE, and it's pushing fresh air into all the living and sleeping spaces, and pulling stale out of there's a stale out of the kitchen, stale out of the basement, both bathrooms, and then a boost button. So, you know, not to pick on Zenders. I'm sure they're amazing, but they cost twice as much as this system did, and I'm sure they're great, but not really seeing that this building needs it. I think what we're doing. So two of the things that I've been learning how to do is not let this building overheat, and I know how to do that now. And the other thing is not overventilate, which is really easy to do. Also, the first winter we were overventilating. It got a little too dry in here because, and I think what a lot of folks don't understand is that when you're kicking a bunch of air out of your house, you're pulling in the wintertime, the air is much drier that you're bringing back in to replace that air, that fresh air. And so it tends to get dry. I got to about 18 or 19% in here for, you know, a few weeks. Ooh, ouch, you know, just not comfortable. There's another way a building can be uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
so turning the HRV down to you know, 20 minutes per hour. I actually reset the speed range to the lowest range possible. If we had two kids and a couple of dogs, probably wouldn't have gotten to that dry in here, because there would have been a lot more human action. But
Yeah, and you might find that, if you had more individuals, maybe an ERV, right? So it got a little too dry with the HRV.
Right.
That's actually something that I talked with a mechanical engineer about. They had an HRV. They actually had a Zender.
Uh-huh.
They had an HRV in, and it was so dry. And they called Zender and said, "Can you send us an ERV core?" And they were like, it literally instantly made a huge difference for them. But they have kids and dogs and other things, right? So they needed the increase in ventilation that you don't need with just the two of you.
Yeah.
So kind of that interesting play between HRV and ERV, and the reminder that, yeah, it can be too dry in these cold climates and the wintertime conditions.
Right.
We put in Broan ERVs all the time for the exact reason that you just said, is they're half the cost. And if they're ducted well and correctly, they work really well.
Yeah.
And so my question, and I scrolled back to the plan for anybody who's watching this or looking at the video, is how did you get the ductwork for the ERV from the basement to the second floor in the spaces? So what's your, you have a couple of LVLs in this framing plan.
Mhm.
Located. How did you get from the basement? Do you have chases? Do you have walls that are thicker? Do you just have thinner ductwork because the system is really small?
Thinner ductwork is part of it. And so I think, let's see, there's a wall, I think the office wall right behind me has got a lot of stuff in it. So this is a wall that brings a lot of stuff up from the basement, which is, yep, exactly. Yep, you found it. I think that's a 6-inch wall. So that's carrying some plumbing drains. The drain water heat recovery device is in this wall from the shower, which is right above me. And so there's some ducting there. We also use open web floor joists, which are spendy but worth it because you get to easily cram a lot of stuff in there. So think about it, folks. You've got a double 2x4 wall and joists you don't have to drill through. Your subcontractors love you, and especially if you get a nice electric salamander, they'll come work on your job any time of the year. You'll be first on their list. So this is something that I have learned. They always go, Dylan's got heat, and there's a lot less drilling. So it's really easy to move things around in a building that's got a lot of places to move things into.
Yeah, I use open web framing a lot. And
Yeah.
it's sort of the joke because in the design world, the mechanical people always seem to be the last people to the table and have the fewest amount of options to get to anything. And so I
Right.
joked with the gentleman that does all of my ERV installs, and he's like, "You do better than you think you do." And I was like, "Oh, it's just all that open web framing. I made your life easy." Um,
Right.
but that is a design tip. And so one of the ideas on Pretty Good House is that you have this, you have a team of people, and whether your design team is the builder or whether you the homeowner or the design team, or whether you have an architect or designer on your thing, something that Bob and I do a lot, and I'll be clear here, Bob's way better than I am at this, is doing those things where you can stack your plumbing chases together. You've got less plumbing runs, you've got hot water sooner, you're not wasting a bunch of water to get hot water, which, in Vermont and Maine, we don't have water shortages like some of the other parts of the country, but there are other parts of the country where you just don't want to run the water for 3 minutes to get hot water. It's just a bad idea. But here we don't have to run it forever till you get hot water. But also too, if you can group your mechanical systems below that, you can make one wall a little bit wider, a 2x6 or a 2x8 wall, and you can run a lot of chases through that. And so having a good design team that layers the plans on top of each other and says, well, if we scoot this wall over 3 inches, it all lines up from the top to the bottom, and we can use that as a chase, right? Because
Yep.
nothing worse than the toilet sitting on top of the LVL, or there's no way to get the ERV from the basement to the second floor, or the hot water tank is on the complete opposite side of the basement from all of the plumbing runs.
Right. Yeah. That's one mistake that I did end up making. And in retrospect, I don't know how I made this mistake, but the water heater is definitely too far away from the shower. I could move it, but it's also really close to the kitchen. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. Which one am I going to use more? Well, you kind of want hot, instantaneous more frequently at the kitchen. So it's really close and it comes really fast there. But it's sort of a long ride to get to the shower.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, try telling your new client that not she, they can't have their bathroom on that corner of the house because you don't want to put a circulation loop in. Like, see what kind of success you're going to have with that argument. I mean, I've tried, but yeah, I usually have to pick my battles.
Right. We all do. We all
Yeah.
do. So Bob, from your perspective, is there anything that you would have done differently in the overall design process? I mean, you acted as a consultant. You started working with a plan that they had already set, which, from my perspective, looks pretty good. So you clearly had a lot of knowledge going into it, ahead of time, Dylan. But I know you're changing some of your techniques. This is a double stud wall that's 12 inches. Anything that you would have said, oh, well, 2 years later, we're doing X, Y, or Z?
Oh, good question. And I really don't remember what for a floor plan Dylan came with. So I'm not even sure what I did. I know I slipped in my ideal kitchen and sold that to him at some point here.
Yep.
I mean, the whole process is, with this house in particular, it's not problem solving, it's problem avoidance. And so, the dormer that didn't happen, that's a whole set of detailing and potential problems that he didn't have to deal with, and some cost savings as well. So yeah, I don't.
Nothing to add. It was perfect. Build this again. So my next question then to you, Dylan, is you said to us that you placed it sort of ostentatiously. We wanted it to look like it blended in. Now I'm looking at this photo going, this looks traditional Vermont to me. It looks like you're in the middle of nowhere. There are some beautiful mountains in the background. But you must have placed it where people can see it. Did you have people driving by all the time going, hey, I want one of those? Or what are you doing here? Or why is this different?
Right. So I liked what Bob said about the the triple gang windows on the above the sink and around the dining room table. That when people drive by, I think there's a little hint of this looks like a building that it's been here for a long time, but I'm not sold on that. I think it's newer. There's something about it that's not. It's a little different. It is up away from the road about 300 feet, 320 feet. There's actually an L in this neighborhood. And what you're not seeing is if you turn about 180 degrees from this vantage point, that's Mount Mansfield, Vermont's tallest mountain behind us. And that is way further away than it looks. I don't know why. It looks like it's in my backyard, but it's not. Anyway, so there's a lot of road frontage that is visible from the house, but far enough away that it's not intrusive. And so people can see the house from two separate roads as they drive into this little village. And there's a little intersection down here. And there are several houses within view of our house that are shaped like this building. So they can see us and we can see them. And it fools you a little bit in that, it does look like it's been here for a while. And then in some ways it doesn't, in that, it doesn't look like a barnyard. There isn't, a farmhouse with a barnyard would not probably be sitting this far away from the road, for one. There's a couple of tips in there that, but it's a nod. It's a hats off to the neighborhood houses that I grew up admiring.
Yeah, well, and I think you could almost wonder if it's new and meant to look traditional in style, or if it's old and you've renovated it, right? And you sort of updated to, I can't tell you how many renovations we've done where people have an existing home, but they want it to be all open concept. Well, when you have a whole bunch of different little windows in different rooms, open concept, well, now you can have a bigger window because there's not a wall in between here. And so it does kind of make you go, huh, well, wait, is that new? Is that renovated? Is that
Right.
old? I don't know. Because it has such a great traditional classic style to it.
Yeah. It's visible from many spots in this little village that it's in. So that was the part that I was sensitive to. I didn't want to um, there's I didn't want to have it up on the highest point of the land at all. There was no need to do that. It's about a midpoint um, on the lot. We cut no trees to build this house. We had a small opening in the to the road that was already established that hay wagons used to go through. The power, you can actually see um, the transformer that we get power from behind the house. That's on the neighbor's property and is about 100 feet from the house. So just about kind of everything about this lot and the orientation for solar were all totally ideal and about the most cost-effective spot to plop a house in this whole neighborhood that I can think of. Um, but I didn't want it to stick out like a sore thumb, because it was something new in town. So I was really sort of sensitive to that. I didn't want it to. I was like, well, I can do new in town, but I don't want it to look really odd either. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. This is a wonderful house that I'm really happy that you shared with us. I think it meets a lot of the pretty good house ideals. It talked about how you built it and what you did. You've lived in it now for 2 years, and so you go on. When you meet with clients at the table, they all say, "I want this. I want what you did here."
Yeah,
So
several have, and it's a really, what I like about PGH conceptually, and this building fitting into that, is that to me it's the sweet spot, and so people are standing inside of it and going, oh, and they're learning about a little bit about the equipment, and really nice finishes, but not crazy over the top and not super budget either. It's just sort of like a good mix of everything right in the middle, performance wise, and not difficult to achieve either. And I think um, makes it reachable to people who have sort of ordinary budgets. And I say that carefully because I don't really know what that means, other than like, I want new buildings and housing to be reachable to working class people. And I think this is where PGH really comes in, really can slide into home plate if it's executed well, is that there are people out there who don't have enough money to build a new house, any kind of new house, period. And we sometimes meet those folks, and that's always a bummer to realize that. But I think this is reachable. I think this kind of a building is reachable to folks who have a budget to build new, and it's not much more than the buildings that we're talking about that are the worst building that you're legally allowed to build in this country. Yeah. It's not that much more to build a really good building. So
yeah. And I think, some of those traditional things, which is, keep it simple, cut down on your mechanicals, doing all of those things really makes that achievable for people. Were there any last details in this that you said, well, that was really hard, and you've come up with a new way to do things in the last 2 years that you've done on projects since then?
I would say basement optional. The only reason I went for a basement was that, well, there were two. There was, I wasn't so sure we were going to do a garage or anytime soon. I knew I wanted a little workspace downstairs to do projects and things. We're high and dry on ledge here, and I also know how to build a basement, and not the kind that still gets built in my neighborhood, which are wrong in many details and wet and gross and cold and everything, for the monsters. Like, so I was pretty confident we'd be okay with the basement, but I would say basement optional. Bulkhead, forget that. Not much point in doing that. As far as construction details, I don't know. I'm probably a few years behind the game, and I'd like to learn more about what you guys are doing for wall systems. I think this wall system is just so simple. It's just a really simple way to get there without climbing around on the outside of the building too much more. I think that really slows the process down, which was one of the reasons I stayed with the approach that I used on insulating the roof. It just seemed like we were done and off the roof fast, and it was the roofer's project. And from then on, we could work inside on any kind of weather day and wrap up all the stuff. Actually, Ellie and I were here in November with a drywall lift, putting all the plywood on as the air barrier on the ceiling upstairs. So on a weekend, it was like it's much easier to do that than climb around on the roof with like foam board and screws this long.
Yeah,
So
I think keeping simple concepts is really a key, right? So the double stud wall is literally just two of the same, the same wall, right? It's really easy for people to understand.
yeah,
I still do a lot of double stud walls. I know Bob's moving into some more modified Larson truss type
yeah,
framing.
yeah.
Um,
This is cool though. Yeah.
yeah, so it's really interesting how that's changing. I mean, I think prior to 2020 and 2021, double stud wall was really easy for people to understand. It was pretty easy for them to figure out how to do their air barrier and how to do it well.
Yep.
And it was cost effective. Now, I don't know, with studs being $7 a stud, it's a little bit less cost effective in the
Yeah.
double stud market. And so it's kind of interesting to see like, okay, well, what do we have to do? And in your case, you expanded the footprint a little bit because you needed a little bit more space. In the Larson truss, where you only have a 2x4 on the inside, you don't have all 12 inches on the inside. Do you get that extra space
Right.
simply in the same footprint
Right.
by going out a little bit instead of in a little bit, or the whole thing expanding? So it's this whole push-pull idea of like, how do we approach that? And there are
Yeah.
so many ways to build a pretty good house, and this is still a great way to do it. And like
Mhm.
you said, you went and you took the classes, so this was a great way for you to use the skills you already kind of knew how to do
Mhm.
in a slightly different way. And I
Mhm.
always ask builders this, to quantify. Now this was your own house, but to get to 0.32 ACH 50,
Mhm.
you spent time air sealing, making sure all of those little details were done. But it's your house, so
Yeah.
yeah, you probably
Yeah.
can't quite quantify how long that took you.
Yeah. Yeah. Using it's in defense of a rigid air barrier and using the exterior sheathing in this wall system as the air barrier and carrying it, being able to trace it across the plan without lifting your pencil off the page is really, really easy in a building that is a simple form. And so we taped the plywood. We made our own zip wall out of half-inch CDX pine and followed it all the way through. And you really can't miss. It's not. There's not a lot of. There's some awkward corners. There's always some weird spots, but and the first time I did one of these buildings, I used way too much tape. I mean, there's no doubt, that we were taping things a couple extra times. You got to do that, right? You got to blow through a whole nother box of 20 from 475 before you realize, whoa. And so now what we do we figured out how to like not do that is we do more blower door tests. So tomorrow, actually, my buddy who's an energy auditor is coming to our current job to test that one layer of tape and plywood. Let's see where we're at first. Did we get it? Great. Do we have to keep going? Probably not, until people start drilling a bunch of holes in our work, and then we'll have to go check it again and again. But so a minimum of 3 tests, probably. One, when you first dry it in, check that out. And then you can maybe shave off a box of 20 Tescon, Vanna tape, maybe. It's going to take you a few houses though to get to that point.
That's really great to know, that for all the builders who are listening, that you too can get there eventually.
You can. You can. We were kind of amazed at some of our first blower door numbers. The first house we did wasn't that good. It was a little bit more of a challenge. It had a wood stove and some other challenges, but we've had several that have been in the 0.5 range, which I'm thinking is like, man, if you can get below 1, you're doing great. Leave it alone. That's good enough. I
Yeah,
wasn't.
I mean, you're starting to split hairs then, right? When you're done with PGH, once you get below 1,
Yeah,
we should
yeah.
be.
You totally are. You totally are. And I don't think it's worth. It's definitely not worth another box of 20 rolls to shave off 0.2. I don't think we had some fun with like tapes and caulks and things with the blower door running. I put a piece of tape up and go, okay, Mark, what did that do? Like to that level, just to find out. I was like, well, anyway, yeah, when you've got it that good, I think you don't have to keep going, probably.
Yeah. So All right. Any last words on Pretty Good House or this house from either of you?
Bob, I talked too much. Do you want to say something?
Oh no, I'm just sitting back and letting this is your show. I'm just stepping in where I needed.
Okay.
He's just here for the show.
Here for the show.
He's just here to support the Pretty Good House movement. So,
I never managed to actually listen to the shows afterwards, so I might as well just
just tune
be part
in.
of it.
You got to be there
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing this with us today, both on the Pretty Good House front, but we have a lot of non-traditional looking, passive house style or really modern style. And so, yeah, Bob with his super modern and then really traditional, right? And so you can do it either way, which I think is really important because unfortunately, I think in the overall industry at large, people think that in order to have a really efficient house, you have to have something that's not attractive, right? Because not all styles are attractive to everybody. And here you've really proven like you can take a cape and you can make it a pretty good house. I mean, you can make it a net zero house. You can make it, I mean, you have, uh, aside from the foam on your walls in the basement and under the slab, you don't have any foam in your upper structure, so you're carbon storing with your cellulose with the wood that you have. So you've done a lot of things here to push towards those low carbon homes as well. So
Yeah.
and you did it with a traditional structure, so it's completely possible to do it with probably any style that you want. So
Totally. We have a few in our repertoire that are from the street, look like just standard ranch houses with 612 pitches that are truss roofs, and it does not get easier than air sealing a shoebox. There's just no way for it to be an easier job. There's just four corners, maybe six. You tape every seam and you do a blower door test and see where you're at, and it's always really close to where you want to go. So yeah, the adaptability is totally there. There was one more thing I wanted to say, and I think it had to do with oh geez, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, reachable, having it be reachable, and having it be oh, I know what it is. It was that people that are having houses built have a lot of decisions to make and are frequently kind of getting ready to get overwhelmed. And I think if the process itself and the energy nerd part of it is digestible and you know, they don't clients don't usually need extra things to be stressed out about, and trying to achieve a really tough to reach goal is just like one more thing that may not be worth it for several reasons, and one of them is just kind of is wearing people out, letting people wear themselves out with a goal that maybe doesn't make a lot of sense anyway. I'm not, I don't know.
yeah, you said two really great things there at the end. The first one was, about taping a shoebox, which is really clear in the metaphor. Jesper talked about it on the BS and Beer show last Thursday. As he said, it's the difference between trying to tape a rake and trying to tape a rake in a box, right? That's already put in a box, right? So every time we have all these jogs and these things, and Bob talked you out of the dormer. I mean, can you imagine having to tape all of the different bumps and everything in the dormer, and then it's in the roof and it pokes a hole, and right? So every time we add all of these extra holes and spaces to it, we're just creating more difficult things to handle.
Yeah.
The approachability, right, is I do a community project and it's a ranch, and the homeowners build it themselves and they dense pack their own walls, and there's there doesn't have to be a huge learning curve there. But at the same time, I like the idea of saying, like, this is my envelope. You can do whatever you want on the inside, but this is my envelope. So it's just one less thing that you have to worry about because you're not going to see it afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the thing that has the biggest impact on your health and how you feel in your house. So let's talk about your comfort, your safety, I say durability, but even homeowners don't want to talk about the durability, right? You could just package that in a like callbacks or having to fix things, right? So you use
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
traditional words is, you hired me to give you the best house that you can get, and you want to be really comfortable here, and these are the things that I think you should do that should just not be taken off the table. And then if there's money left, let's really soup up some, the kitchen or the bathroom or whatever, because you could have a really beautiful kitchen or a really beautiful house. I talked to a real estate agent a couple of years ago who said, I built this $1 million house. This was a couple of years ago when $1 million went farther than it does now. But I built this $1 million house, and it was so cold and it was so awful to live in it that we sold it after the first year. And then we went and we found an architect who could help us to build a high performance home, because we spent all this money for this beautiful thing and it was just awful to live in. And I think that's the one reminder that we have to give to people is, you have hired us as the professionals to help you get there within a budget that you can afford to spend. And here's how you'll be comfortable in it. And it's going to, we're building legacy homes. We're not building disposable homes at this point. So I love this. I hope all your neighbors drive by and go, oh, I wish my Cape was as high performance as that.
No, I love everything that you just said. It's so huge. We so frequently talk to people who have difficulty forcing themselves to even enroll their projects with Efficiency Vermont because they just don't need one more thing to worry about. And it isn't just the clients, it's the builders that don't have the experience also. So there's a lot of like builder buy-in and education that are crucial to this whole program. Because if the builder acts stressed out and doesn't know, or sort of says, "Oh God, I don't know about all that energy stuff," blah blah, and it just makes it seem like this difficult, not reachable thing, then people give up on it. And we have a little offering on our website that's called that is owner builder support. And what I'm trying to do is catch my hippie friends from screwing up their houses before they build them, because around here people still like to build their own houses, and I think that's great, but they often call me when it's way too late to put insulation under their slab or something silly like that. And so I just wanted to get it out there. I will come and help you make sure that, like you said, I love that program, Emily, that let's get the envelope right, and from there you can timber frame away or do whatever you're going to do, but let's make sure there's an air barrier in here. Let's make sure there's generous amounts of insulation, good, cheap, carbon friendly, carbon storing insulation in this building. And then, it's not hard. It's not hard. So the accessibility is a huge factor, and approachability was the word that you used, which I think is more important. If people think of this as some out of reach, cost wise, out of reach, time wise, effort wise, worry wise program, it just isn't going to reach the level that it needs to. Someday this is going to be the code level. That's what we're aiming.
Well, and codes are getting better and stricter in different places. I know you don't have a building code, but you have an energy code or something like that. Maine has a building code, but we're still using the 2009 energy code, right? And so things are, then you look at New York and they've got I think they have 2018 plus a stretch code, right? So there are different things in different parts of the country, and it's getting better. And unfortunately, one thing that I feel like is the building science stuff isn't approachable, but there are materials that are readily available, and people are, as Sonia had said to me, violating the laws of physics, right? Where does the water go? Where does the vapor go? Where's all this stuff happening? Right. And are we creating issues because we've made it so that people feel like it's not approachable to learn, right? It's not approachable to learn how to do this. Like, how do we do the builder hands-on training that you took, the passive house builder training, and you got to put your hands on things and use the tape and see that it sticks to literally everything or nothing or whatever. And so there's just so much that I think Pretty Good House is really trying to be the approachable method to doing a little bit better with what you have, and that there's not a metric that you have to hit that requires you to, use complicated things or do things you wouldn't otherwise do. It's sort of this plug and play system that helps you to evaluate how to do it better. So, so I appreciate you sharing your project and how you did that.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered and I'm glad to help. And this is really close to my, you know, um, just kind of school of thought, I guess I would say. I'm kind of on the northern terminus of where I do business and live. I don't get out into the further reaches of the Northeast Kingdom much with business and commerce and building. And there's a definite southerly pull for the kind of work that we're doing. So it's a interesting demographic. It's a depressed area, and I I I have wondered whether I'm kind of on some sort of a frontier. There doesn't seem to be many people around north of me trying to do what I'm doing here, and I've questioned it at times. I thought, well, am I just doing too much? Is this too much for most people? And I don't think so. I think it's just the word hasn't gotten out. It hasn't spread. Everyone's got an uncle that was a builder that knows better. You know, my dad was one of those guys. He's going, oh, he thinks I'm out of my mind, right? But now that he comes into my house, he's like, huh, oh, it worked. Okay, well, interesting. So
Yeah, you gotta love that, right? And so
yeah,
it's like, oh, that's never gonna work. Oh, hey, that worked.
that's interesting. It worked. So it's going to take some time. It'll take some lumber yards to coming around to helping us by not offering stupid products that don't make any sense, and also perpetuating bad building science. There's tons of that around. If I could just quit being a builder, I could find some time to go run around and straighten out the supply chain in my area. That would help a lot because builders are showing up totally exhausted and trying to get a job done so they can get paid or whatever it is that their situation demands. And they're showing up at the lumber yard and buying whatever's on the shelf and slapping it up. And, so they don't have a lot of time to do the work that I did to figure out how to do it better. And I can totally respect that. I can totally respect that. I understand how this keeps going this way because people are overburdened. Builders have a lot on their shoulders a lot in many cases. So it's a little bit of everything. Got to help each other out.
Yeah. And you said something, well, a couple of things there. I would love for every lumberyard to have a building science person that reviews every like major material list that goes out, to help people out. But BS and beer and the Pretty Good House go pretty well together. One, because it started at our local discussion group. That was where Pretty Good House was born,
Yeah.
where we would get together and we would talk about these things. So I'm really excited about the advent of both the BS and Beer Show, making those discussions available to people all over the country, and even outside of the United States, but also spurning people to start their own groups as hopefully our country will transition back into getting together in person. Because I remember one where Mike puts on a BS and Beer show in Liberty, and the topic was, water control layers or water resistive barriers, however you want to term that level. And there were several builders who came who said, well, how do I know what's the right thing to use, right? And they're like, well, if I walk into the lumber yard, they're just going to sell me whatever they have on the shelf that's available, right? And that's not always the right answer. Sometimes that's perfectly fine. It might be the right product,
Right.
but sometimes it might not be. And we're not taking that extra step to say, well, wait, what do we have here? What do we have for insulation? How thick is this wall? Where's it going to go? What's it going to be attached to? What's going to go over it? What's,
Yeah.
do you have a rain screen, etc.? And so everyone always hates it. Like, well, how do I know what's the right thing? And we say, it depends.
It depends.
Right?
I know it's a hard answer.
Right.
And I've said this to my crew too. We shouldn't us on the crew shouldn't know more than the guy that's selling us stuff down in Hardwick, but we do. And I shouldn't know more than the HVAC guys that I just interviewed last week, but I do. It's going to catch up, but it's going to catch up. And I'm not saying I'm surrounded by people who don't know what they're doing. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that I know a little bit more, and it's about something slightly different, but not really. And it's out there. And there are a group of builders in my community who are totally on it and totally get it. But the majority is not that. And it's just a self-perpetuating thing, the lumberyard and the old school mentality, and the guys like my own father who are like, that's never going to work. Like, yeah, it does actually. Come yep. To our project. And so, yeah, it's a It's the whole program. It's going to seep into the whole program for this to work.
Yeah, it was sort of a joke a joke, but yeah, important. The other week we were on talking with Dave Willie on sorry, not Dave, Mark Willie and Dave Cooper.
Mhm.
Well, way to put those two together on BS Friday. And there was somebody in the chat box who's like, "Can I sign up all my homeowners for this class?" And I thought, oh my goodness, there needs to be a pretty good house homeowner class, right? The,
Yeah,
it's like a thing. If you're going to
yeah,
build a house, you should take the pretty good house homeowner class, right? And it's just, it doesn't have to be really in depth and really sciencey and really whatever. It just has to be a little bit of knowledge about what you're getting with a house. And this reminder that, your house is never maintenance free. No matter what you put on it, it's not maintenance free. That's not a thing.
totally. Yep, that's
There,
not a thing.
there are simple decisions that you can make, but there are also zero tolerance houses, which are impossible to do. So don't say, I just want this simple thing, because sometimes simple equals zero tolerance, and those two things are not the same.
Right. Uh-huh.
Sometimes the fussy details are how we make two things connect together.
Uh-huh.
That needs to happen.
Right.
Right. So I
Yeah.
mean, just kind of some of these really, really simple ways to talk about it, to get people the comfort, the health, the safety, and that they have no idea what's in their homes.
Right.
My favorite thing in seminars is to ask people how many people have been in their attic, right? And
Right.
it's good that the number is usually low, because I don't want people to go in the attic, right? That should be the last place. You are not allowed to store things up there. You shouldn't
Yeah.
be in the insulation. Just stay
Right.
out of the attic. But
Right.
at the same time, they haven't been in their attic, so they don't realize when they say house needs to breathe, that house needs to dry. It doesn't need to breathe. And that the stuff coming from your attic, if you ever poked your head up there, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's gross. You would never want to breathe that.
Right.
So anyway, we could go down a whole tangent. And at this point, I have to just quit, or we will be here for, this will be the 3-hour Pretty Good House podcast, because, the three of us, I think, could toss out ideas. We're all drinking the Kool-Aid, both the Pretty Good House Kool-Aid and the high performance, build it better, build it safer, build it healthier movement. So again, I appreciate you sharing your particular house on this one. And Bob would like to say something, so we're going to let him now chime in, since he's been so quiet.
I have one last thing to say. So I like how Dylan's going to be our first Pretty Good House instructor. And I like how Dylan has set himself up for the next phase in his career as a consultant.
I think by coming on the podcast, Dylan, you just got voluntold to do some new things.
Oh, I did. That's great. That's a good new word to use also. Thank you for that. And,
I love that word.
I knew this was coming. I just didn't know how I was going to snap into my next thing. And I was an instructor. Right, how to do that and keep it approachable. I'll leave it at that. How to do that, how to show my peers in the hood that it's doable, and how to do that in an approachable way that's not that's just I'll just leave it at that. Approachable.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's where we all need to be going, is how do we make Pretty Good House approachable? Not just the standard, but the overall concept that you've bought into this idea.
Yeah, totally. So. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you both coming on today and sharing your time and expertise with the people listening to the podcast or watching the video replay. So we'll say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you in the next podcast.